So today we're looking at all things PPSR and its related functions within finPOWER Connect. The functionality covered today requires the PPSR add-on, which also requires the security register add-on as a prerequisite. We'll start as usual with a general overview of the basics to aid understanding for our users and support staff who may not be familiar with this part of a finance company's business or this area within finPOWER Connect. First things first, the prerequisite add-on of Security Register adds the security menu within finPOWER Connect and its related forms and functions. This introduces things like the Security Types admin menu, the security statements and security items, which are used to record the information for the security item or agreement being supplied by the borrower as collateral against the lending. A simple example of a typical security item is a borrower may supply a car, a house, or a boat. By offering this item as security or collateral, as it is also known, they're agreeing that the finance company has the right to the item should the borrower stop repaying the loan. That is, of course, an oversimplification for a complex area that involves legislation, contracts, and what you may hear referred to in legal terms as recourse options and actions and more. Security in some circumstances may not be a physical item. For instance, it is common for commercial lending to have something called a General Security Agreement, also known as a GSA. This allows the lender recourse over the assets of a company should the company fail to meet the obligations of their lending agreement. But how does the security become recognisable or enforceable? And what stops a borrower from using their car to secure loans with multiple finance companies, reducing its value or making it impossible for all interested parties to be repaid? This is where security registers come in, and also on the flip side, a lender's due diligence in the pre-lending checks on any proposed security. A security register itself is a national body that allows registrations to be made under a company or individual, detailing the nature of the security itself and who the holder of the security is, also known as the secured or interested party. The register can also be searched to check a person or item to make sure they've not used the proposed security as collateral elsewhere. It's important to note a secondary interest can be registered by a different secured or interested party, but it then becomes a priority situation, and whomever registered it first has the first priority to receive any proceeds from a forced sale or for repossession, etc. I won't delve too deep into the nitty-gritty of that today because, as mentioned, it is a complex area covered by a lot of legislation and also depends on the governing bodies for the country you're in. And at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the finance company to do their own legal due diligence to make sure what they're supplying in terms of a contract wording and what they're using or registering for security is fit for purpose and in line with relevant legislation and naturally their own credit policies as well. The specific security registers we're covering today are the PPSR for Australia and how it integrates with finPOWER Connect and the New Zealand PPSR. PPSR stands for Personal Properties Securities Register in both countries. It's also important to briefly touch on the non-PPSR security registration options before we dive on in, which relates to lands and buildings or improvements, as we do have a number of lenders using finPOWER Connect for home lending purposes and commercial lending involving property. In New Zealand, there's a registered database called Land Information New Zealand, or LINZ, where different types of legal security interests relating specifically to land or properties like mortgages and caveats can be registered as an interest against a certificate of title for properties, and a similar system in Australia, but at a state level. These are not integrated via API with finPOWER Connect, due in part to the lack of current API availability and the nature of additional rules and regulations for these databases, like the necessity for the administration of registering and discharging mortgage instruments to be completed via a solicitor in most cases, rather than a lender directly. However, the forms in finPOWER Connect do have the ability to record the relevant details for lending involving properties, including values, security lending ratios, reporting and recording mortgage numbers, and so on. so can still be used well as part of the complete finPOWER Connect loan management system. So that all being said, let's move on to what we do have integrated. The basic premise for both countries is the same. You record the details of, load an interest against, and search for information on an existing or new security. Users can complete the registration process via finPOWER Connect without needing to navigate directly to the PPSR online portals. It is updated directly via the API sent from and subsequent response received into the lender's finPOWER Connect database. API, just in case somebody out there doesn't know, stands for Application Programming Interface. And when we refer to APIs, we mean customized compatible information exchanges or access via a request and response process, written in a coding language compatible with the service being integrated. This can vary widely in how it looks and the functionality available, but is commonly sent and received in languages like XML or JSON. Of course, the most technical part of the process isn't seen by your average end users, thanks to the wonderful work of our developers who make things appear as nice and clean and simple as possible at the user interface level, ensuring finPOWER Connect receives the information, updates the relevant fields, and then displays the information in a nice readable format. In cases of error troubleshooting or for customizations, a support staff member or code analyst may need to see the raw information. And in order to see the actual request and response, these are stored on a service log, which we've covered in other sessions and is not something we're covering in depth today. This is just more for a high-level overview of the ins and outs for informational purposes. As you can see in this image, it simply describes how the exchange of the information takes place, and the end user will run the relevant wizard designed by development. And when they click next or finish, the request is sent, the response is received, and the information is interpreted and displayed back to the user. And this typically happens very, very quickly. So moving on to the differences between New Zealand and Australia and how you get some of that information into your database. To record the security against a loan in finPOWER Connect, both countries use the security statement form provided by, as mentioned, the security register add-on, which in turn has the attached record called a security item, as briefly touched on earlier. Also used as the security types, which helps to further define the kind of security that is being supplied. For example, a car, as mentioned earlier, or an item such as a computer, which may have a serial number that can be used to aid in the registration on the PPSR. The PPSR add-on then provides the ability to use the API, as mentioned, but also adds the ability to import some default security types to get you started with your configuration. We have covered this before, but if the lender is new to using the security register and PPSR add-on in finPOWER Connect, the module should be initialized by using the new company wizard in global settings, as shown here for Australia. As we can see here, several different security types are added automatically, which can be configured further as required. The security-related forms will naturally show different fields and menu options for each country to cater for the differences between the two. One of the major differences between the two countries is that in Australia you must register each item individually, whereas in New Zealand it can be registered under the one financing statement with multiple items listed. Therefore, in an Australian database, the action buttons to individually register an item is on the security item form, which we'll see soon, and the action buttons to send the information to the PPSR in New Zealand are on the security statement form itself. In Australia, the statement form simply has the Perform B2G Updates button, which will complete any of the required updates for the items attached to that statement for their individual registration, such as any name changes for the borrower or renewals, and will also check the financing statement status on the PPSR. The form we're looking at here is a New Zealand account on the security page. I just thought I'd change the image while I continue to discuss this. The legal financing statements themselves are made up of collateral types and collateral classes, and whilst the wording and structure may differ between the two countries, the underlying purpose is mostly the same. The security information is registered under a financing statement on the register, and the financing statement defines the type of security it is and its class. This is important to get right, or the lender runs the risk of the security being invalidated and making it unenforceable. For example, you wouldn't want to accidentally load a commercial security type for a consumer, and so on and so forth. Thankfully, there are validation rules and warnings to help avoid this, which will appear in your summaries and things like that. However, careful configuration is required and encouraged. There's plenty of information available on both PPSR websites that detail the available types and classes that can be referred to for guidance, but the lender should seek their own advice about which to use if they're not certain. There's a maximum time period for a financing statement. I believe in New Zealand it's 5 years, and it must be renewed before it lapses to continue the validity of a lender's rights to on-sell the item in the event of a default and protect their priority. There are notifications sent out from both PPSRs to the lender about any upcoming statement expiries that should be monitored so that they are renewed in time, which is also handled within finPOWER Connect, provided the initial configuration is completed correctly. And financing statements must be discharged within a reasonable time frame if requested, usually on the event of the lending being repaid, or if the security is being replaced with a new one, sometimes called a security swap. Discharges are also able to be completed via the API in finPOWER Connect. finPOWER Connect is programmed, as you could expect, to send the relevant class and type information based on the configuration of your security types, which we will cover that form shortly. But first, I'd like to take a look at an example of a security loaded in finPOWER Connect. So as we're showing here, a security statement and its attached security items can be created via a few different processes, such as part of the new account wizard itself and by using the Add button from the security statement form here. Once you've got your security statement, they can be linked to accounts or clients or both. And you will then find them on those corresponding forms. So this one here, as we can see, is linked to an account, but also if we open the security statement up, we can see it's linked to a client as well. And on the statement itself, if you go to the security items page, the security items form is the one that holds all the minor details about the item itself. And if you drill down from here and open up that form, you can see that for a motor vehicle, there are certain fields available, which changes depending on the underlying security type. The motor vehicle forms will show things like registration number, VIN, chassis details, and valuation details. And you can see some of more of the built-in warnings that may appear depending on the security type. So here we've got information about motor vehicle renewals as an example. This is partly to alert the lender that their security may be compromised, making it worthless essentially. Security types themselves, as touched on earlier, are configured in the admin library, and a bunch will be created by the initializing the security registers add-on. This is the New Zealand options. The Australian ones look quite different. For example, in Australia, as a base type, you may have several different options, such as motor vehicle or aircraft, and they may have not applicable fields for land, which cannot be registered on the PPSR. More can be added via this form if required, and the descriptions themselves can be changed, which then appear on the financing statements. However, these two lists here of base type and class are determined by what is actually available on the PPSR and therefore are limited to those lists. Security type form also allows for the configuration of other characteristics, such as for motor vehicles and things, whether trade-ins are allowed, whether it's a physical item that can be repossessed, which can be utilised by some of finPOWER Connect's other processes. And on the other page, other values and things can be set, like information lists that are relevant to that type of security. So taking a motor vehicle into consideration, you can have an information list here of motor vehicle makes and models, which then filters through to adding the security for a user to select from the drop-down list. So a Toyota for a car is an example. Our demo database does have good examples of this, where you can attach some system information lists and then update them further as required by the information list admin library. We don't have time, unfortunately, today to follow each and every type in class, but as we always say, the easiest way to learn an area of finPOWER Connect is to simply test it. So moving on to the security menu itself, which is added by the add-on. Obviously, this is different between New Zealand and Australia. So in New Zealand, the security options that are added are as follows. So we've got the PPSR search, where you can search by a number of different methods. This example here is showing by a debtor person. And you step through the wizard, select your client, and then it will search the register for any securities they may have, and you can filter it down by collateral type. As we can see here, Amelia sample has a lot of hits, but from there you can drill down and have a look at the actual statement and what it says and who the secured party group is and so on. So a lot of good information can be used using the search function. It also adds the update wizard, where you can, in bulk, register any new statements that haven't automatically been completed, pick up any pending amendments, discharge any that are due, or renew them as shown here. Also available is the PPSR Secured Party Group report, which if you've got a multi-entity database is really useful because you can pick up from the secured party statements relating only to that particular group. There's also an option in the New Zealand security menu to run a debtor advice document and a PPSR transaction report. Obviously in the Australian menu, we've got the PPSR B2G options, which is the integration with the Australian PPSR. To New Zealand, they've got the search option, which allows you to search by VIN, individual, company, and by financing statement number, I believe. And there is a PPSR B2G mailbox, which is a wizard that will import any outstanding notifications from the PPSR. That one is very dependent on having your initial API configuration completed in the right order, but it should be able to be received within finPOWER Connect to tell you of any upcoming statement renewals and discharges, etc. PPSR in Australia also has the B2G update wizard, which does the same function as our New Zealand wizard, basically, but for Australia. So the Australian API requires, before a client can do any testing or complete any live requests, the credentials have to be sorted, obviously. This isn't a difficult process, but like with many governments or national services, this can take a while. In order to get the API key and secret sorted, you first need to register for an account with the PPSR via their website and be able to log into their online portal. Once the online account has been configured, the lender can then apply for B2G access, which is where they are then issued with the API key and secret from the PPSR. This should be completed by the lender in conjunction with their IT team or network administrator, as their IP addresses will be required by the PPSR for access to be granted. Then, thirdly, the secured party group needs to be set up, and this must be done after the B2G access has been granted in order to ensure certain items are received back into finPOWER Connect, especially for the mailbox, as part of the integration. All three places required to start with the sign up are on their website and are very easy to locate and will be available as links in the description below the video on YouTube for easy reference. There's also substantial documentation in our online help to guide you through the process of signing up. Once the access has been sorted, as mentioned, the main details are stored in global settings. And this is the area in global settings that I was just starting to talk about here. So global settings will provide a warning, and there's also a setting here that will alert users in the wizard of when the password is going to expire. They usually last, I think it's quarterly that they get changed, and it's important to do that in the right order and by the right time. So moving on to the other buttons, as shown in the image here, there's a few different options depending on the circumstances. So the normal process when a password's expiring would be to click the renew button. This is completed close to or just after the expiry of the current password, which needs to be updated approximately quarterly as mentioned. As you can see, there's also the option to display a warning to the users, I already mentioned that, of expiring within the defined period, so they can advise their appropriate user with the necessary access to complete the renewal process. The restore button is used where a password has already been renewed or issued and needs to be updated in more than one database. Typically, this is more likely to affect testing scenarios where the same credentials are being used in multiple databases. The reinitialize button should only be used if the current PPSR password is lost and a new one has been requested from the PPSR directly. It shouldn't be used in any other scenario, hence why in our online help there is a big warning as pictured also in the image here. Secured party group details are stored in the admin library of the same name, and on the general page you can simply add in a code and description or name of the secured party group and the details provided by the PPSR in here. You can click the verify button to confirm that the details are correct. On the service page of the secured party group details button down here will import the details held for the secured party group on the PPSR, imports it directly into the finPOWER form, and this can then be further edited if required. This information here is used when printing the grantor advice document. For New Zealand, for the New Zealand PPSR, there's a process and it's a bit more complex. And because of this, we have a separate document available to guide you through this process. This is located in our user guide section on the Intersoft website, and we strongly recommend this is followed carefully, as we often get queries through to support where the user, as an example, hasn't subscribed to the right API and received confirmation of access, which is separate to the API and key and secret, which are accessible at an earlier point in the process, and this often causes a little bit of confusion. A few things of note are that a user will require a RealMe account, which is a government supplied access for people that requires verification and proof of identity. The PPSR is part of other Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment API groups, and therefore access to others such as the New Zealand Companies Office is a similar process. There are upcoming changes that are supported in version 3.4.5, but as far as I'm aware, aren't live quite yet. That involves a new cloud-based API, which we're not covering today, but there is information available on our knowledge base if people require more information. Normally, once a lender has everything set up in global settings, finPOWER Connect will use those details for any statement registrations or discharges. It is, however, possible to override the global settings at a user level in user preferences for New Zealand. This isn't available in Australia. So the user can use their own key and secret that is linked to them and their realme. And if the lender requires their staff to be noted on the PPSR as the member who completed this registration. Otherwise, global settings will be used and all statements will be noted as being registered by whomever's details are added in global settings. But these requests are also audited in finPOWER Connect, so the lender still has the option to review the service logs and audit details on the security item or statement to see who made the request. The secured party group determines the company details of the lender and who is the holder of the security, and therefore the secured party group must also have the user linked to them externally. When setting up a secured party, it's important to keep a note of the login details, and it's recommended to have more than one administrator who can add users to the group, and this also prevents being locked out after an admin leaves the business. The secured party group details are instrumental facilitating the registrations and along with the financing statement number and PIN, which are stored in finPOWER Connect, are used to discharge a security. So if you lose access to the secured party, you'll be unable to discharge the security without contacting the PPSR, which is less than ideal. As mentioned, for updates and discharges, if the secured party group matches, it shouldn't matter which PPSR user specifically processed the initial request. So we've come to the end of what I have prepared for today. Thank you for bearing with me again. And as always, if there's any additional information you seek, don't hesitate to contact application support for user interface queries or code support in relation to code-specific questions. This is a very big area, so there's still a lot more we could say. So please don't hesitate to come to us for more information.